The sun was sinking low over the desert plains, painting the horizon in streaks of gold and crimson that melted into the dusty sky. A faint wind whispered through the tall, brittle grass, carrying the dry scent of the earth that hadn't felt rain in months. Ethan Cole trudged down the long dirt road, his heavy boots leaving shallow imprints in the sand. He looked like a man carved out of the land itself, rough, quiet, and weather-beaten. His hands were calloused, his shirt stained with old sweat, and his hat tilted low to shield his tired eyes from the setting sun. Everything he owned fit inside a torn duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and even that felt heavier with every mile he walked. He'd once been a man people looked up to. A rancher with over 100 acres, cattle that grazed under the wide sky, and a house that glowed with the laughter of his late wife. But the drought had stretched too long and hope had run too short. When the last of his cattle died, the bank came knocking, cold and unfeeling. The foreclosure notice had felt like a knife through the chest. He had begged, borrowed, sold everything he could, but it wasn't enough. One morning he woke up to the echo of his boots in an empty house. He'd stood in the doorway of his old home, staring at the walls that had seen his whole life unfold, and whispered, "Guess that's it then." Now, miles from anywhere, he walked that lonely road, each step echoing in the hollow silence around him. His truck had given up hours ago, coughing its last breath in a cloud of smoke before dying for good. He'd sat behind the wheel for a while, hands gripping the steering wheel like he could will it back to life. But even he knew when something was beyond saving. So he started walking, heading toward nowhere in particular, just away, from failure, from memory, from himself. As twilight deepened, the desert began to cool, the air turning sharp against his sunburnt skin. Crickets started their nighttime chorus, and in the distance, coyotes cried. Ethan stopped by the roadside, letting the duffel slide off his shoulder. He lowered himself to the ground, his joints aching from years of hard labor. The silence pressed against him like a weight, reminding him that there was no one waiting for him anywhere. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small photo, his wife, Anna, standing on their porch with a smile so warm it could light up the night. She'd been gone 3 years now. Taken by illness that came fast and cruel, he ran his thumb over her face. "You'd laugh if you saw me now," he murmured, voice rough. The great Ethan Cole, sleeping by the road like some lost drifter. He leaned back against a rock and closed his eyes. Maybe he'd rest a while, then walk again at dawn. Maybe he'd find work somewhere, fixing fences, breaking horses, anything. But beneath the exhaustion, a deeper thought gnawed at him. Maybe he didn't have the strength to start over anymore. The sound of an engine broke through the quiet. At first he thought he was imagining it, a mirage of sound in the desert night, but then headlights cut through the darkness, growing brighter, closer. Ethan squinted, shielding his eyes. The vehicle slowed as it neared him, a dusty old minivan, the kind families used when life demanded practicality over pride. The engine hummed low as it rolled to a stop beside him. For a moment he just stood there, unsure whether to wave or walk away. But then the driver's window rolled down. A woman's face appeared, illuminated by the dashboard light. She looked to be in her late 30s, her brown hair pulled back in a loose braid, strands falling across her face. Her eyes were soft but sharp, the kind that had seen too much yet refused to turn cold. "You okay out here?" she called, her voice carrying concern but also caution. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't used to strangers stopping for him. "Truck died," he said simply. "Been walking since noon." The woman frowned. "That's miles from here. You're lucky you didn't pass out in this heat." She leaned back, glancing at the passenger beside her. "June, what do you think?" The second woman leaned forward, her golden curls catching the faint glow of the headlights. Her expression was lighter, her tone more playful. "I think he looks like he could use a meal, and maybe a shower," she said with a small smile. "You alone out here, cowboy?" Ethan managed a dry laugh. "Seems like it." He shifted his weight, uneasy. "I don't mean to trouble anyone. Just needed to rest my legs a bit." "Nonsense," said the brunette. Mara, as he would soon learn. "You'll come with us. It's not safe out here after dark." She pushed the passenger door open. "We're heading back toward town. There's space in the back if you don't mind the mess." Ethan looked at the open door, torn between pride and exhaustion. He'd spent his life being the one offering help, not asking for it. But as he glanced down the empty road stretching into endless darkness, he knew there wasn't much choice. "I'd appreciate that," he said finally. picking up his duffel and climbing in. The minivan smelled faintly of hay and soap, with the back seats cluttered with grocery bags and a pair of small boots. Ethan sat quietly, feeling out of place. The women exchanged a quick look but said nothing as Mara started the engine again. "I'm Mara," she said after a while, eyes on the road. "This is June. We live about 15 minutes from here." "You from around these parts?" "Used to be," he replied, staring out the window. The desert blurred past, shadows dancing under the headlights. "Had a ranch near Clearwater Creek?" "Had?" June asked gently. "Sold," he said. "Or rather, lost." He didn't explain further, and they didn't press him. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, just the kind of quiet that understood pain didn't always need words. After a few minutes, June turned slightly in her seat, studying him. "So what's next for you, Mr. Cole, Ethan Cole?" "Well, Mr. Cole," she said with a soft smile. "What's your plan?" He shrugged. "Find work, I suppose. Something that keeps me moving." "Don't need much." June exchanged a glance with Mara. "You're in luck," Mara said. "Our little farm's falling apart faster than we can fix it. Could use an extra pair of hands. We can offer a bed in the barn, meals, and some pay once the next crop comes in." Ethan blinked. "You'd hire a stranger off the side of the road?" "Maybe we're just crazy," June said with a laugh. "Or maybe we just believe good people deserve a chance," Mara added softly. "We know what it's like to lose everything." Something in her tone made Ethan turn to look at her, but her eyes stayed on the road, distant and unreadable. He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. He knew the sound of loss when he heard it. When they finally pulled up to the farm, it was close to midnight. The place was humble but alive, a weathered house with a porch light flickering weakly, surrounded by fields that stretched into the darkness. A barn stood off to the side, its roof patched in places, its doors creaking softly in the breeze. Inside, faint laughter spilled from the windows. Children, Ethan realized, though he couldn't see them yet. "Home sweet home," June said, climbing out and stretching. "Don't mind the chaos. Between the kids, animals, and leaky roof, we've got our hands full." Ethan followed them toward the house, the earth cool beneath his boots. He noticed toys scattered on the porch steps, a broken tricycle leaning against the railing. The place had the feel of struggle, but also warmth, like it had been kept alive by sheer willpower. As they reached the door, Mara turned to him. "You'll stay in the barn tonight. There's a cot and some blankets. We'll talk more in the morning." Ethan nodded. "You've already done more than enough," June smiled. "Don't thank us yet. Wait until you've met the twins. They'll have you roped into chores before sunrise." He gave a faint chuckle. "I reckon I can handle that." They led him to the barn where a small lantern glowed faintly inside. The smell of hay and horses greeted him, familiar, comforting. Mara set the lantern on a crate. "It's not much, but it's dry. You'll be safe here." "It's perfect," he said, setting his bag down. He paused, then added, "Thank you. Both of you." Mara nodded once, the corners of her lips lifting in the faintest smile. "Get some rest, Ethan. Tomorrow's a long day." When they left, the barn fell quiet again, save for the distant hum of crickets. Ethan lay down on the cot, staring up at the rafters. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel entirely alone. The air smelled of earth and wood, the sounds of life surrounding him instead of the hollow silence he'd grown used to. He closed his eyes, and for a moment he could almost hear Anna's voice again, whispering in his memory, "Keep going, Ethan, you're not done yet." And as sleep pulled him under, he didn't realize that this strange act of kindness, two women stopping on a lonely road, would become the turning point of his story. He didn't know that the days ahead would reveal truths buried deeper than the land itself. All he knew was that for the first time in years, he had somewhere to rest and maybe, just maybe, a reason to keep walking forward. "You said, expend part 2 in 2,000 words without headings," ChatGPT said. The morning came with the smell of coffee and the faint sound of laughter drifting from the house. Ethan woke to sunlight slipping through the cracks of the old barn wall, painting thin golden lines across the dusty floorboards. For a moment he didn't move, his body sore from the hard cot, but his mind still heavy with the fog of unfamiliar comfort. It took him a few seconds to remember where he was. The barn, the kind women, the offer of work. A strange peace settled in his chest as he sat up and looked around. It had been a long time since he'd woken to anything other than silence. He pushed open the barn doors and stepped outside. The air was cool and crisp. carrying the faint sweetness of dew settling on dry grass. The world felt still, like it hadn't quite decided to start yet. Out beyond the fence, the land stretched wide and quiet, the kind of emptiness that could be both freedom and loneliness depending on the heart that looked at it. For Ethan, it felt like a second chance, though he didn't dare admit that to himself. "Morning, cowboy." The voice came from behind him, light and teasing. June stood by the porch with a coffee mug in hand, her golden curls catching the sunlight. She wore a faded plaid shirt tied at the waist, her smile quick and easy. "You sleep all right?" Ethan tipped his hat slightly. "Better than I have in a while, ma'am." "Barn's sturdy, cot's fine." June laughed softly. "You sound like a man used to making do." "I suppose I am," he said, glancing toward the field where a few old fences leaned tiredly. "You weren't kidding when you said this place needed work." "Yeah," she sighed, looking over the property. "It's been a rough year. Drought hit us hard, but we're still standing barely." She took another sip of coffee before nodding toward the porch. "Come on, Mara's making breakfast. You might as well start the day on a full stomach if you're going to help us tame this mess." Ethan followed her up to the porch, his boots thudding softly against the wood. The front door was open, letting in a stream of warm air that smelled like biscuits and fried eggs. Inside, the house felt alive, messy but full of spirit. Dishes clinked, a dog barked somewhere in the back, and two small children ran through the kitchen, giggling. The twins, Mara's kids as he quickly learned, were about 6, a boy and a girl with matching brown curls and bright eyes. The girl stopped in her tracks when she saw him, clutching a wooden toy horse. "Mama, there's a stranger in the kitchen." Mara looked up from the stove, smiling faintly. "That's not a stranger, Lily, that's Mr. Cole. He's going to help us with the farm." The little boy grinned. "Can he fix my wagon?" "It's broke!" Ethan chuckled, kneeling slightly. "I reckon I can take a look at it after breakfast." The children exchanged excited looks before running off, shouting something about showing him their fort later. Ethan straightened, feeling a warmth in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. He'd forgotten how simple laughter could fill a house. "Don't let them wear you out," Mara said, placing a plate in front of him. Her voice was soft but firm, her movements efficient. There was a quiet strength about her, the kind that came from holding too much together for too long. She wore no makeup, her hair loosely tied back, and her hands were rough from work, but there was a grace in her exhaustion. "This looks good," Ethan said, sitting down. "It's just eggs and biscuits," she replied. "Still looks good," he said again, and for the first time she smiled, really smiled, the kind that softened her face completely. They ate in a comfortable silence, broken only by the sound of the twins arguing over who got the last piece of bread. June joined them, humming quietly as she poured herself coffee. She moved with the ease of someone who'd made herself at home in chaos. After breakfast, Ethan followed Mara outside to the barn. The sunlight had grown brighter, stretching long shadows across the ground. "The fence out by the east field's falling apart," she said, pointing with her gloved hand. "If you could patch that up, it'd save me a trip." "Consider it done," Ethan said. She nodded and started to walk away, then stopped. "Ethan," she said, her voice quieter now, "I know you're not here for charity, but if you ever feel like this place is too much or too little, you're free to go anytime. No hard feelings." He met her eyes and nodded. "I don't run unless I have to." Something flickered in her gaze, a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Good, then we'll get along fine." For the rest of the morning, Ethan worked along the fence line. The sun climbed higher, the air warming with the scent of dry earth and cedar. He fell into the rhythm easily, his hands steady as he hammered new boards into place. Sweat trickled down his neck, dust coated his boots, and for the first time in months he felt useful again. From the porch, June and Mara occasionally watched him. June nudged Mara with her elbow. "You found us a good one." "He found us," Mara replied. "You think he'll stay long?" "I don't know," Mara admitted. "Men like him don't usually stay anywhere for long," June smirked. "Maybe he just hasn't had a reason to." By the time the sun began to dip again, the fence was fixed, the tools neatly stacked, and Ethan's shirt was soaked through with sweat. He wiped his brow and turned toward the house where the twins were waiting with 2 glasses of lemonade nearly spilling over. "We made it for you," Lily said proudly. Ethan smiled, taking the glass carefully. "Well, that's mighty kind of you." He took a sip, pretending not to notice the seeds floating inside. Best lemonade I've ever had. The kids giggled and ran off to play. Ethan watched them for a moment, something wistful in his eyes. Dinner that night was livelier. The table was crowded with dishes, simple food but plenty of it, and the air buzzed with chatter. June told stories about her son who was 17 and worked part-time in town. Mara laughed softly, teasing her about his rebellious streak. Ethan mostly listened, occasionally offering a quiet comment that made them both smile. When the kids went to bed, the three adults sat on the porch. The crickets sang and the stars stretched endless above them. June leaned back in her chair, sighing. It's been a long time since we had company. The house feels different tonight. Hope that's a good thing, Ethan said, lighting a cigarette but not smoking it, just holding it between his fingers out of habit. It is, Mara said. You've got a calm about you. The kind that steadies a place. Ethan chuckled softly. Funny, never thought of myself as steady. My life's been nothing but storms lately. Storms pass, Mara said quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. What matters is what's left standing afterward. There was something in her tone, something that made Ethan want to ask what kind of storm she'd been through. But he didn't. He sensed she wasn't ready to talk, and he wasn't the kind of man to pry. Instead, he said, You two always been running this place together? June smiled. Pretty much. We met a few years back at church. Both single mothers, both tired of asking for help we never got, so we figured we'd help each other instead. That's rare, Ethan said softly. Most people walk away when things get hard. Yeah, June murmured. But sometimes the people who stay aren't blood. They're just the ones who choose you. Her words lingered in the air, echoing something deep in him. As the night grew cooler, Mara stood. You should get some rest, Ethan. Tomorrow we'll start early. Fence work's just the beginning. He nodded, standing too. Thank you for the meal, for the bed, for everything. She gave him a small, tired smile. Don't thank us yet. This place has a way of testing people. We'll see if you still feel grateful after a week. He laughed quietly. Fair enough. When he returned to the barn that night, he sat on the cot for a long time before lying down. He thought of the day, of the laughter, the warmth, the unspoken grief in Mara's eyes, the easy humor in June's voice, the innocence of the children. It had been years since he'd felt part of something, even in the smallest way. The loneliness that had haunted him for so long didn't feel as sharp now. He glanced toward the farmhouse, where a single light still glowed in an upstairs window. Maybe it was Mara reading to the twins before bed, or maybe it was June, drinking one last cup of coffee before sleep. Either way, the sight of that small light filled him with something unfamiliar. Hope. Fragile but real. He lay back and closed his eyes. The barn creaked softly as the wind brushed through its cracks. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan Cole slept with a faint smile on his face. Over the following days, his presence became part of the rhythm of the farm. He woke before dawn, fed the animals, and worked until dusk. The women trusted him quickly, and the children adored him. He fixed the tractor, repaired the roof, even built a swing from an old tire for the twins. Every evening they ate together, shared stories, and laughed more easily than before. But sometimes, when he caught Mara staring out over the fields at sunset, her expression distant, he knew there was something beneath her calm surface, a secret, a weight she carried. June noticed it too. There were whispers between them when they thought he wasn't listening, quiet words that vanished when he entered the room. He didn't think much of it then. He told himself it was none of his business. He was just a hired hand passing through, helping two women keep their world from falling apart. But deep down, something told him that whatever tied them together, their bond, their silence was tangled with something he didn't yet understand. And whether he meant to or not, Ethan was already part of it. He just didn't know how deeply yet. You said, expend part 3 in 2,000 words without headings. ChatGPT said, the days rolled into weeks, and life on the farm found a rhythm that was both peaceful and strange. Ethan settled into the work as if he'd always belonged there. Each morning began with the crowing of a distant rooster, the soft glow of dawn spilling over the fields, and the comforting sound of the world waking up. The twins would come racing out of the house to meet him, barefoot and laughing, and Mara would follow, coffee mug in hand, her hair loose and wild in the early light. June, always humming, would bring out baskets of laundry or feed for the hens, waving at Ethan with that same sunny smile. To an outsider, it might have looked like a perfect picture of country life. Hard work, good people, simple peace. But underneath, Ethan began to sense something else. Something quiet and unsettled. It started with small things. Letters arriving in the mailbox that Mara quickly tucked into her apron pocket before anyone could see. A phone call that made June's voice drop low as she walked out onto the porch, whispering words he couldn't make out. Tools missing from the shed, and when he asked, Mara would say, "Must have misplaced them," though her tone held something more like worry than carelessness. Ethan wasn't a man to pry. He respected privacy the way he respected the land. You don't dig where you haven't been invited to. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from him. One evening, after a long day repairing the barn roof, Ethan sat on the porch with June. The sun had gone down, leaving streaks of rose and violet across the sky. The children were asleep and Mara was inside cleaning up after dinner. June sat with her legs tucked beneath her, watching the stars appear one by one. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked quietly. She turned her head toward him, surprised. "Leaving?" "Yeah," he said. "The farm, the town. Starting over somewhere else," she laughed softly. "Every day, if I'm being honest. But this place, it's more than land to Mara. It's history, family. She'll never walk away from it." Ethan nodded. "She told me her husband's gone." "Years now," June said. "He left before the youngest could talk. She kept this place running on pure will." "That explains a lot," Ethan murmured. "She's tough as rawhide," June smiled. "That she is. But even tough hearts get tired, Ethan. Don't let the steel fool you. She's still carrying things she doesn't talk about." He looked at her curiously. "Like what?" June hesitated, eyes flicking toward the house where a dim light glowed in the kitchen window. "That's for her to tell you," she said finally. "But if she ever does, just don't judge her too quickly." The way she said it made Ethan's chest tighten. He didn't press further. But later that night, when he lay in bed staring at the rafters, her words echoed in his mind like a whisper he couldn't silence. A few nights later, he woke to the faint sound of voices outside. The clock on the barn wall read nearly midnight. The air was cool, the kind of still that made even the trees seem to listen. He got up, pulling on his boots quietly, and pushed open the barn doors. The voices were coming from near the old oak tree behind the house. He moved silently through the shadows until he saw them, Mara and June standing close together, the moonlight catching the pale curve of June's face. Between them sat a metal box half buried in the dirt. "You can't keep this a secret forever," June whispered, her voice sharp with frustration. "I have to," Mara hissed back. "If he finds out, everything we've built will fall apart." "He deserves to know," June said, trembling. "You think lying will make it better?" Mara's voice cracked, raw and desperate. "You think I want to lie? You think I wanted any of this?" Ethan stood frozen in the dark, his heart pounding. He didn't know what the box was or what they were hiding, but something about the fear in their voices struck deep. Before he could decide whether to step forward or turn back, June suddenly looked up and saw him. Her eyes widened. "Ethan?" Both women turned toward him, the air between them snapping tight. "I didn't mean to," he began, but Mara cut him off, her face pale in the moonlight. "How much did you hear?" "Enough to know something's wrong," he said quietly. "What's in the box, Mara?" She stared at him for a long time, her jaw tight, her eyes filled with conflict. Then she turned away, kneeling to push the box back into the dirt. "Not now," she said, her voice trembling. "Please. Not tonight. Mara." "Tomorrow," she said sharply. "I'll explain everything tomorrow." Ethan didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, though the unease inside him grew heavier. As he walked back to the barn, he could feel their eyes on his back. He didn't sleep at all that night. Morning came gray and cold. Mara didn't appear for breakfast. June moved quietly, her usual cheer gone. The children noticed the tension, asking questions that went unanswered. After sending them outside to play, June finally looked up from the sink, her eyes tired. "She'll tell you," she said. "Give her time." It wasn't until the afternoon that Mara came to find him. She looked pale, her hair pulled back messily, her hands trembling slightly. "Can we talk?" she asked. Ethan nodded. They walked to the far edge of the field where the fences met the line of trees. The air was heavy with the scent of dry grass and dust. "I owe you the truth," she began, her voice low. "I should have told you from the start." He waited, silent, watching her gather her courage. This land, she said finally, isn't really mine. It's yours, Ethan frowned. What are you talking about? She pulled a small envelope from her pocket and handed it to him. Inside were old papers, yellow deeds, notarized signatures, and the unmistakable name written in faded ink, Cole Ranch Holdings. My father, Ethan murmured. Reading the signature. Yes, Mara said softly. Years ago, before I ever lived here, your father owned this land. He sold it illegally to a man named Fletcher, my husband's father, to pay off debts. Fletcher forged some of the documents to make it look legitimate. When your father passed, the paperwork disappeared. My husband inherited the property, but he left before I could tell him what I found. Ethan's throat tightened as the weight of her words sank in. You mean to tell me this place has been mine all along? In the eyes of the law, yes, she whispered. When I found those papers hidden in the barn, I didn't know what to do. I thought about giving them to you, but then I saw how broken you were that night on the road. I was afraid if you knew, you'd leave, or worse, you'd take it back and we'd have nowhere to go. Ethan looked at her, disbelief turning to anger. So you decided to keep it from me. Let me fix your fences and rebuild you. He found her standing by the fence, eyes swollen from crying, her hands clasped together. She looked at him like she wasn't sure if he'd stay or walk away. I'm not taking the land, he said simply. Her head jerked up, eyes wide. What? You heard me. You've made this place what it is. The least I can do is help keep it that way. We'll run it together. One day maybe we'll sort out the papers. But for now it's home. For both of us. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time she didn't look broken. She looked free. And as the sun rose over the fields, Ethan felt something inside him shift. The truth hadn't destroyed them. It had revealed something stronger. Trust, forgiveness, and the quiet beginning of something that might one day be love. He realized then that sometimes the hardest truths were the ones that built the strongest foundations. And that night by the oak tree, when he'd seen them in the moonlight, wasn't a moment of betrayal at all. It was the night his real life began,